The night shift was always the quietest at the outpost. Most officers disliked it, but for the young alien girl sitting in front of the radar screen, it was her favorite time. The silence gave her space to think, and the soft humming of the machines almost felt like music. Nothing unusual ever happened here. The scanners showed the same empty patterns, and the stars outside twinkled in their usual calm way. But tonight was different. She was adjusting the frequency on her radar when a strange blip appeared on the screen. At first, she thought it was an error, an echo caused by dust particles in the atmosphere. That happened sometimes, and she was trained not to panic over it. Still, this signal was not fading like normal interference. Instead, the mark grew brighter, sharper, more defined with every second. Her 4 fingers tapped nervously against the console. She adjusted the calibration again. The blip remained. Her heart beat faster. The readings were not from any known ship in their registry. The design of the signal was strange, too powerful, too raw. It didn't match the smooth energy patterns of her people's vessels. It was heavier, almost brutal. She leaned closer, her eyes fixed on the glowing green dot. "No, it can't be," she whispered to herself. Old childhood stories rose in her memory. Tales told by elders when she was very small, about creatures who lived on a violent planet, a place where storms ripped mountains apart and predators hunted without mercy. Those stories spoke of a species that should not exist, beings who survived in impossible conditions. They called them humans. Her classmates had always laughed at those tales. "Humans are myths," they said. "Scary bedtime stories." But looking at the screen now, she wasn't so sure. The blip shifted again, breaking through her doubt. The object was moving fast, faster than her people's patrol ships. Its course was direct, as if it knew exactly where it wanted to go. The girl's chest tightened. She quickly opened a channel to her supervisor. "Sir, I have an unknown contact on long-range radar. Bearing 134, moving at incredible speed." The voice that came back was tired and annoyed. "Probably interference. Clear your system and restart." She hesitated. "With respect, sir, I already recalibrated twice. The reading is consistent." A long pause followed. Then a sigh. "Fine. Log it and continue monitoring. Do not raise alarms for ghosts." The connection ended. The girl sat in silence, her tail flicking behind her in frustration. She wanted to obey, but something inside told her this was not a ghost. This was real. Minutes passed, and the signal only grew stronger. She began to run deeper scans. Each layer revealed more unsettling details. The ship was enormous compared to their scout craft, built with dense metal plating, the kind used for war. Its energy core burned like a star, pumping out levels of power that should have been impossible for such a small vessel. Her hands trembled. She tried to breathe slowly. "Calm down," she told herself. "Maybe it's a new model from the fleet. Maybe it's just—" But the thought died before it could comfort her. She knew every model in their database, and this was not one of them. The radar beeped sharply. The ship had changed direction. It was no longer passing by. It was heading directly toward her outpost. Her skin flushed cold. She zoomed in and enhanced the outline of the craft. Its shape was strange, rough, and practical. Not elegant like her people's ships. It looked like it had been built for survival, not beauty. Its design carried scars of war, edges sharpened for survival in hostile skies. Her mind returned again to the legends. Humans, the Deathwelders. Fragile in appearance but harder than steel. A species no one believed existed. Her voice shook as she whispered, "It can't be them, can it?" She checked the data again. The oxygen signature was clear, the metal composition was unusual, the core readings were chaotic yet stable. Everything about it screamed alien, yet also strangely familiar to the old descriptions of the mythical humans. The girl swallowed hard. Her hands hovered over the console. Should she raise the alarm? If she was wrong, she would be mocked for the rest of her career. But if she was right, this moment could change history forever. The ship slowed as it neared atmosphere. The radar pinged louder, filling the quiet control room with a chilling rhythm. Her eyes widened. The system confirmed identification, not a ghost, not an error. A real vessel. Her chest tightened, and every hair on her skin stood on end. She felt as if the myths had walked out of her childhood stories and were now hurtling through the skies above her. She pressed the record button, locking every detail into the system's memory. If no one believed her, she would still have proof. The screen glowed brighter. The radar traced the path of the object until the word appeared in alien script across the console. Unclassified vessel, human origin likely. Her mouth went dry. She sat frozen in her chair, her eyes locked on the impossible signal. For the first time in her life, she realized the stories were not just myths. Humans were real. And they were coming. The young alien girl could not take her eyes off the glowing signal on the radar screen. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and alive, as if mocking the silence of the outpost. She had already reported it once, and her superiors had brushed her off. To them, it was easier to believe in machine error than in old ghost stories. But she could not let it go. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers curling tight around the edge of the console. The stories she had heard as a child returned to her again, louder this time, clearer. Her grandmother had told them in hushed tones, always late at night, when the sky was dark and the winds howled outside the dome. They come from a cursed planet, her grandmother would say. A place where fire rains from the sky, and oceans swallow cities. They are small, fragile creatures, but they cannot be broken. They fight storms, beasts, even each other. And when the stars opened, they spread into the dark, carrying their madness with them. Back then, she had laughed nervously at those words. She thought they were just bedtime tales to make children behave. But now the blip on her screen seemed to carry those whispers back to life. Her mind raced. Could it really be a human ship? Or was fear tricking her? She opened the old archives, something she was technically not supposed to access without clearance. The records were dusty and half-erased, filled with warnings and half-truths. Many had been labeled mythology or unverified. But the more she read, the more the descriptions matched the vessel she was tracking. Heavy metals. Unstable reactors. Oxygen-rich environment. Brutal designs. Her chest tightened with every line. Her people had long considered humans an exaggeration, wild stories of deathwelders who built weapons out of stone and later machines out of fire. The official histories claimed such beings never existed. But here it was, a living dot on her screen, moving with purpose. She thought about telling her supervisor again. But she knew what would happen. They would roll their eyes, scold her for wasting time, maybe even mark her as paranoid. No one wanted to be the officer who cried about fairy tales. So she sat there in silence, her tail curling anxiously, and whispered to herself, "I know you're real." The radar beeped again. The ship was closer now. Her breath caught. She imagined what they might look like. Were they monsters? Were they brilliant? Were they both? Her grandmother had described humans as fragile, soft-skinned creatures who could barely breathe their own toxic air, yet somehow survived longer than anyone else. Fragile, but unbreakable, she murmured. The thought made her shiver. Suddenly, a voice startled her from behind. "What are you staring at?" It was one of her fellow operators, an older male officer who had just entered the control room. He looked at the screen and scoffed. "Ah, another radar glitch. Stop feeding yourself ghost tales." She quickly minimized the archives, hiding the forbidden files. "It's not a glitch," she said firmly. "Look at the energy reading. Look at the reactor output. That's no vessel we know." The officer shrugged. "So maybe smugglers. Or some experimental craft. Don't tell me you think it's them." His voice carried sarcasm when he said the last word. She froze, her throat tight. "And if it is?" He laughed. "Then we are all dead. But don't worry, little one. Humans are just myths. Nothing more." He walked out, leaving her in the low hum of the machines again. But she was no longer sure. Her eyes returned to the screen. The blip shifted again, no longer random, no longer distant. The ship had changed course. It was now heading directly toward her world. Her pulse quickened. She leaned closer and pressed the record function again. She needed evidence. If this truly was a human ship, she would not let history ignore it. Then something unexpected happened. The radar console flickered. A faint signal pulsed across the communication channel. At first, it was only static. Then patterns began to form. She realized with shock, it was a transmission. Someone out there was trying to send a message. Her hands trembled as she decoded the basic structure. The language was unfamiliar, rough, yet rhythmic. Strange symbols appeared on her screen, forming lines that her translation software could barely process. It was not any known alien tongue. Her eyes widened as the system struggled to piece together fragments. 3 words appeared, broken but clear enough to chill her blood. "We are here," she gasped. The blip pulsed brighter than ever, as if confirming the words. The girl leaned back in her chair, her breathing shallow. She had no proof they were hostile. She had no proof they were friendly either. All she knew was that the myths had just spoken across the stars. Her grandmother's words echoed once more, fragile, but unbreakable. Now she believed them. She whispered softly to herself, "Humans are real." And for the first time, fear and wonder filled her heart in equal measure. The outpost was never meant to face legends. It was a quiet listening station, built to track smugglers and survey distant trade routes. Its walls were thin, its officers untrained for battle. But that night, under the soft hum of machines, it became the stage for something far greater. The young alien girl sat frozen before the console. The words from the transmission still glowed faintly on her screen. "We are here." She could not erase them, no matter how much she wanted to. Her supervisor finally returned, grumbling about routine patrol reports. "Status?" he asked casually. Her mouth went dry. Should she tell him? Should she risk being laughed at, or worse, punished, for accessing forbidden archives and suggesting a mythical species had just contacted them? She hesitated. "Unidentified vessel, approaching closer," she said carefully. The officer glanced at the radar and frowned. The blip was now a sharp, glowing marker, cutting straight toward their sector like an arrow. He leaned closer. His casual tone vanished. "That's no smuggler." For the first time, he looked uneasy. The alarm was raised. Other officers filled the control room, voices overlapping in a wave of panic. Reports flew across the network, ships on standby, defense turrets online, emergency signals preparing to be sent. Yet no one could identify what the intruder was. The girl remained silent, clutching the secret truth in her heart. She knew what it was, even if no one else dared say it. The ship was slowing now. Its speed dropped sharply as it neared the planet's upper atmosphere. The radar lines buzzed with data. Engines, primitive by her people's standards, but immensely powerful. Hull, thick, scarred, built for punishment. Core, chaotic, unstable, yet somehow balanced. It was like watching a storm hold itself together. The officers argued over what to do. Some shouted to open fire before it landed. Others urged patience, fearing it might be a new ally's craft. The council would decide soon, but the girl felt time slipping through her fingers. Her screen flickered again. Another signal came through. This time it was stronger, clearer. Not just static, but structured sound. She pressed her earset against her head. A voice filled her ears. Deep, steady, strangely calm. She didn't understand the words, but the tone carried weight. It was not the voice of a monster. It was not the shriek of a predator. It was the sound of someone human. Her chest tightened. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The officers looked at her in confusion. "Hear what?" She realized the transmission was faint, buried under noise, too weak for standard receivers. But she had tuned her console differently, after hours of practice listening to ghost signals in the void. It was her own curiosity that allowed her to catch it. Another whisper of sound came through. The voice repeated itself, calm and deliberate, as if knowing someone was listening. Her eyes burned with tears she couldn't explain. It was real. This wasn't a story. This wasn't myth. Someone out there was speaking to them. She wanted to answer. Every part of her wanted to press the button and respond, even if only with static. To let them know they weren't alone. But fear chained her hands. If she spoke, she would be accused of treason. Contact with unknown vessels without council approval was forbidden. She bit her lip until her fangs pricked skin. The room erupted as the ship finally broke atmosphere. Flames danced across the radar display, marking its entry. The image resolved into a silhouette on their screens, a vessel descending like a falling star. The officers gasped. "By the stars, it's massive." The girls stared at the shape. It was nothing like their sleek silver ships. It was blocky, uneven, but alive with raw power. Every line spoke of function, not elegance. Every scar on its hull whispered of battles survived. And as it descended, she felt something deeper, an aura of defiance, a spirit that refused to be broken. The ship slowed, stabilizing above the plains not far from the outpost. Dust storms rose in waves beneath its thrusters. Lights glowed along its hull, sharp and blinding against the night sky. The officers panicked. "Ready weapons," one shouted. "Call reinforcements," cried another. But the girl only stared, her heart pounding like war drums. For all their fear, for all their panic, she did not feel hatred in that ship's presence. She felt something else, an invitation. The voice returned once more, louder now. Her translation software struggled, spitting out fragments. Words appeared on the screen. "Peace. Not enemy. Talk." Her eyes widened. She pressed a hand over her mouth. They weren't here to attack. They were here to speak. But no one else in the room believed it. To them, it was a threat, an invader, a nightmare come true. The girl trembled as she looked between her panicking comrades and the glowing signal on her console. She knew she faced a choice that could change everything. Stay silent, and let fear lead her people into war. Or answer, and let history remember that she was the first to speak to the humans. Her claws hovered over the console. The voice whispered again, almost like it was waiting just for her. She closed her eyes, and for one breathless moment, the entire galaxy seemed to pause. The control room was chaos. Officers shouted over one another, alarms flashed red across the panels, and defense crews armed the turrets outside the outpost. The mysterious ship hovered silently above the plains, its massive shadow stretching across the ground like a storm cloud. To most in the room, it was a threat. To the young alien girl, it was something else. Her console still pulsed with the faint human signal. The words on her screen repeated, broken and raw, "Peace. Not enemy. Talk." Her people didn't hear it. They only saw a monster ship. But she heard it, clear as if someone whispered into her ear. Her tail flicked nervously as she looked at the officers. None of them noticed her console flashing. They were too busy shouting about defense protocols, authorization codes, and whether or not to fire first. She leaned closer to her screen. The signal came again. A voice, calm and steady. She could almost feel the patience behind it. Whoever was on the other side was waiting for her to decide. Her claws hovered over the comm button. One push, and she would be committing treason. Contacting an unclassified species without council approval was a crime that could end her career, or worse, her life. But if she stayed silent, history might record this day as the moment her people attacked a ship that came to speak. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "What do I do?" she whispered to herself. Then she remembered her grandmother's words, fragile, but unbreakable. Her claws pressed down. The channel opened with a faint hum. For a moment, she froze, unable to speak. Her throat tightened, fear clawing at her chest. But then the voice came again, clearer this time, flowing through the open channel. "Human vessel, seeking contact, peaceful." She gasped. The translation software caught fragments and displayed them on the screen. "We come in peace. Request to talk." Her heart hammered. They were not here to destroy. They were here to talk. She swallowed hard and whispered into the comm, her voice shaking. Who are you?" Static filled her ears. Then, after a pause, the reply came. Slow. Careful. "We are humans." The word hit her like a thunderclap. She had expected it, but hearing it spoken aloud made her shiver. Humans. The myths. The stories. Real. Before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the room. "What are you doing?" Her supervisor stood over her, eyes blazing with anger. He had seen her activate the channel. She stammered. "Step away from that console," he barked. Do you realize what you've done? Contact without clearance is a crime. The other officers turned, staring in shock. Whispers filled the room. She felt their judgment like knives against her skin. But before anyone could stop it, the human voice spoke again, loud enough now that every console in the room picked it up. The message echoed across their systems, translated roughly by autoscripts. We mean no harm. We seek friends. The entire room fell silent. Every officer froze, their arguments dying on their lips. They had all heard it this time. The words of the myth, carried across the stars. Her supervisor's face paled. He stared at the screen, then back at her. What did you do? He whispered, his anger fading into disbelief. The girl's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. I listened. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then another officer muttered, It can't be. Humans don't exist. Yet the evidence glowed on every screen. The radar. The translation logs. The voice. The human ship hovered patiently outside, making no aggressive moves. It waited, as if giving them time to decide. The girl felt something stir in her chest, something she had never felt before. Hope. Her supervisor finally spoke again, his voice trembling. If this is true, if they are real, then everything we thought we knew about the galaxy is wrong. No one argued. The human voice repeated once more, soft but firm. Talk to US. We are here. The girl's hands shook, but this time she wasn't afraid. She pressed the comm again. Her voice came out steadier than before. This is the outpost of the Vayari people. We hear you. A pause. Then the human replied, Thank you. The word was simple, but it carried weight. Gratitude. Respect. The girl exhaled slowly. For the first time in her life, she realized she was standing at the edge of history. The myths were no longer whispers. They had spoken. And she had answered. Outside, the human ship's lights dimmed slightly, as if signaling calm. The massive vessel hovered peacefully, waiting for the next step. In the control room, no one moved. Every officer stared at the girl, as if unsure whether to punish her or thank her. But deep in her heart, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the first true contact. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The night air outside the outpost was heavy with dust. Engines from the human ship stirred the plains, kicking up storms that glowed faintly under the moonlight. The massive vessel hovered low, silent but alive, like a predator watching from above. Inside, the control room was split. Half of the officers wanted to attack immediately. The other half argued to wait for orders from the council. Fear and indecision gnawed at them like claws. But the young alien girl felt something different. The human voice still echoed in her mind, We mean no harm. We seek friends. Her people argued endlessly, but she could not ignore the steady tone of that voice. It was not the voice of a conqueror. It was not filled with hatred. It was calm, patient, human. Her tail flicked nervously as she made her choice. While the others shouted, she slipped out of the control room. Her steps were quick but quiet, her heart pounding in her chest. She passed through the narrow halls of the outpost, each door hissing closed behind her. She knew what she was about to do was forbidden. If caught, she would be branded a traitor. But curiosity burned hotter than fear. She reached the outer gates. Beyond the shields, the human ship glowed like a fallen star. Its surface was scarred, patched with different metals, but every mark spoke of survival. No alien vessel she had ever seen looked so raw, so alive. She tapped the panel, deactivating the lock. The heavy gate opened with a low groan. The air outside rushed against her face, sharp with dust. She stepped forward, her legs trembling, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. Yet something in her chest urged her on. Closer! The ground shook as the human ship descended further. With a deep roar, its thrusters quieted, and it landed on the plain. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. A hatch opened. The girl froze, her throat tightening. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp. Tall, broad, wrapped in strange armor that gleamed under the moonlight. The silhouette looked almost fragile compared to her kind, yet there was a weight in the way it stood, a strength that was not in muscle but in spirit. The human descended the ramp slowly. Each step echoed in the stillness. The girl's claws curled nervously. Her heart raced. She had seen countless aliens from neighboring systems, but nothing prepared her for this. Humans were supposed to be myths. Yet here one was, walking toward her. When the figure reached the ground, it stopped. The helmet shifted, and then, with a soft hiss, it was removed. The girl gasped. The face was unlike any species she knew. Smooth skin, no scales, no fur. Eyes deep and sharp, glowing faintly with reflection. The human's expression was calm, almost gentle, yet behind it she sensed a will as hard as iron. For a moment, neither spoke. The universe seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the human raised a hand, an open gesture, slow and deliberate. A greeting. Her claws twitched. She remembered the stories. Humans never bowed, never lowered their heads, but they always faced storms with open hands. Fragile, but unbreakable. She swallowed and mirrored the gesture, lifting her hand. The human's lips curved slightly. A smile. The girl's chest tightened. It was such a small expression, yet it carried warmth. Then a voice came, steady and low, "Peace." The translation device on her wrist struggled, but the word was clear enough. Her throat trembled as she answered in her own tongue. "Welcome." For a moment, something shifted between them. Myths became reality. Fear became wonder. But the moment did not last. Shouts erupted behind her. A squad of officers had followed. Their weapons glowed, pointed at the human. Their leader's voice thundered, "Step away from it." The girl flinched. "No! Don't shoot!" But they ignored her. The human did not move, though the weapons were aimed at its chest. Its eyes remained calm, watching them with quiet defiance. The girl's heart pounded. She stepped between the human and the soldiers, spreading her arms wide. "Stop!" Gasps erupted. "What are you doing?" one officer shouted. "It's a monster." "No," she said firmly, her voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "It's not a monster. It's real. It's alive. And it came to talk." The soldiers hesitated, their claws tight on their weapons. The human stood still, saying nothing, but its steady presence spoke louder than words. The girl turned her head slightly and looked up at the human. Their eyes met for the first time, alien to alien, yet not enemies. She felt it in her bones. This was not the end of a story. This was the beginning. The silence stretched. The soldiers looked uncertain. Their leader's jaw tightened. And then, with a reluctant snarl, he lowered his weapon. One by one, the others followed. The human exhaled softly, relief flickering across its strange face. The girl let out the breath she had been holding. Her gamble had worked. For the first time in history, a human and a Vayari stood side by side, not as enemies, but as something new. The human stood quietly on the dusty plain, surrounded by armed Vayari soldiers. The alien girl was still in front of him, her arms spread, her claws shaking but firm. The night winds howled across the desert, lifting clouds of dust that swirled around them. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the entire galaxy was watching. Then, with a hiss of engines, a council ship descended from the sky. Sleek and silver, it landed beside the outpost. From its glowing ramp emerged the Vayari counselors, elders wrapped in ceremonial robes, their eyes sharp, their expressions hard. They had been called urgently, and their arrival meant only one thing. This moment was no longer a local affair. It was now history. The soldiers bowed as the counselors approached. The alien girl lowered her arms but did not step aside. The human remained still, watching with calm, unblinking eyes. One counselor stepped forward, his voice booming across the plain. "You dare trespass on Vayari soil. State your purpose, outsider." The human's translation device crackled. A low, steady voice echoed back, "We seek peace. We seek friends." The crowd of soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Some hissed under their breath. The words were clear, but none wanted to believe them. Another counselor sneered. "Peace? Do you expect us to believe myths? You are nothing but a parasite crawling from the dark." The girl's chest tightened. She wanted to shout, to defend the human, but her voice was small compared to the power of the council. The human, however, did not flinch. He raised a small device from his belt and pressed it. A projection burst into the air, bright and raw. Gasps filled the plane. The hologram showed images of a world unlike any they had seen. Oceans crashing with storms, mountains split by fire, forests filled with predators. A planet violent and alive. Earth. The human spoke again, his voice steady. This is our home. A death world. Every day, we fight storm, hunger, beasts, and each other. But still, we live. The translation crackled. The words were broken, but the meaning was undeniable. The Vayari soldiers stared in disbelief. Their eyes widened as the projection showed humans building cities, flying ships, and reaching the stars, all while their world tried to kill them. The girl's heart pounded. She could feel the truth burning in those images. This was what her grandmother had warned her about. Fragile creatures who should not exist, yet refused to die. The first counselor snarled. Lies! You show us tricks. But the human pressed the device again. New images appeared, scars on his people's bodies, wrecks of ships, graves of fallen explorers. Pain. Sacrifice. Struggle. And yet, through it all, humans survived. The girl finally found her voice. She stepped forward. This is no lie, she said firmly. Look at them. Their world should have destroyed them 1,000 times over. But it did not. They endured. Just as the story said. Murmurs spread among the soldiers. Doubt flickered in their eyes. Another elder hissed at her. Silence, child. You break law by speaking for an outsider. But she did not bow. She lifted her chin, her voice trembling but strong. If law says we must blind ourselves to truth, then maybe the law is wrong. The crowd gasped. No one spoke to the council like that. The human looked at her, his strange eyes steady, as if silently thanking her. The lead counselor raised a claw, signaling the soldiers. Take them both. We will not let myths infect our people. The soldiers hesitated. Some raised their weapons. Others kept them lowered, unsure. Fear battled curiosity in their hearts. The human did not resist. He stood calmly, as if ready to face whatever came. But the girl stepped in front of him again, her voice fierce. If you strike him, you strike me. If you silence him, you silence truth itself. Her words cut through the night like fire. The soldiers froze. Some looked at her with shock, others with quiet admiration. The counselors snarled, but they could not hide the unease in their eyes. For the first time, their authority wavered. The human's voice came again, softer now, almost like a plea. We are not your enemy. We are survivors. We wish to learn. To share. To live. The girl's throat tightened. She turned to the crowd. You heard him. Myths don't bleed. Myths don't speak. Myths don't come across the stars asking for peace. Humans are real. And they are here. The plane fell silent again. Dust swirled around them, carrying the weight of a decision that would echo across generations. The counselors glared, but even they could feel it. Truth was slipping through their grasp. And deep in her heart, the girl knew, whatever happened next, the galaxy would never again dismiss humans as myths. They were real. They were unbreakable. And their story was only beginning. The desert plain lay silent after the clash. Dust hung in the air, glowing faintly under the moons. The human stood tall but calm, the alien girl by his side. Around them, soldiers whispered, torn between fear and awe. The counselors glared, but their authority no longer felt absolute. The myths had walked out of storybooks and into reality. No one could deny it now. The human lowered his device. The projection of Earth faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the night. His voice came again, soft yet steady. We came, not to conquer, but to share. The words echoed across the translators. Simple. Clear. The girl felt her heart swell. For generations, her people had mocked the idea of humans, dismissing them as childish tales. But here was proof, fragile creatures from a deadly world, asking not for war, but for friendship. Still, the council was not ready to let go of fear. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice sharp. You speak of peace, but peace is the mask of invaders. We will not be fooled. You are a danger to the galaxy." The human did not argue. He only looked at the elder with calm eyes, then slowly pulled something from his pack, a simple metal badge, scratched and worn. He held it up, letting the moonlight catch its surface. The translator whispered, "Explorer, not soldier." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The girl's breath caught. He was not here to fight. He was here because he was the first, sent to discover, to learn. Alone, across the endless dark. The elder snarled again, but the soldiers no longer raised their weapons. Doubt had taken root. Some even lowered their heads, ashamed of their fear. The girl stepped forward, her voice carrying in the silence. "You say he is a danger. But so is every unknown star, every storm, every journey beyond our maps. Danger is not the enemy, fear is." Her words rang true in the ears of the younger soldiers. They shifted, murmuring, their eyes turning not to the council, but to her. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of leadership on her shoulders. The human looked at her, his strange eyes shining with something she recognized, respect. He had faced storms, war, and death, but in that moment, he saw her stand as an equal. The lead counselor hissed, furious. "This is madness. We cannot." But he was cut off by a sound in the sky. Engines. Every head turned upward. Through the thin clouds, new shapes appeared, dark, massive, breaking through the atmosphere with thunderous roars. More ships. The soldiers stiffened in panic. The elders shouted orders. Fear returned like a wave. The girl's heart pounded. Were they an invasion? Had the human lied? But then she saw the lights. Not weapons charging, not fleets ready for war. The ships flew in formation, steady and patient, like travelers arriving at a port. Their hulls carried the same scars, the same rough strength. The human raised his badge once more and spoke, "We are many. We seek to join, not to destroy." The translation struggled, but the meaning was clear. The girl exhaled, trembling. This was no army of conquest. It was a people stepping out of legend, reaching across the void. The soldiers lowered their weapons fully now. Even the elders fell silent, their authority drowned out by the impossible sight above them. The girl felt her chest tighten. She knew the galaxy had changed forever. The myths had come not to burn their world, but to share their truth. Humans were real, fragile yet unbreakable, and their story had only begun. She turned to the human beside her. For a moment, their eyes met, alien to alien, yet bound by something deeper than fear, by recognition. The human gave the smallest of nods. A silent promise. The girl whispered softly, almost to herself, the legends were never lies. They were warnings and invitations. Behind them, the horizon glowed as more human ships descended, carrying voices, histories, and dreams from a world once thought impossible. The night was no longer quiet. It was alive with the sound of a new era being born. And in that moment, standing on the dusty plains of her outpost, the alien girl understood. This was not the end of a story. This was the beginning of a new legend.